All right. So first off, the basics, right? So the Great Axe itself, this is going to be your standard build for it in a war clump fighting meta. So the abilities that we're prioritizing, we're going to have Charge, Maelstrom, and Gravity Well. I'm going to go over all these abilities and how to use them at a higher level a little bit later on once we get to the more advanced section. This is just kind of going through the builds real quick, just to kind of give you a snapshot of what we're looking at build wise. Warhammer, same thing. This is your basic build. This is our CC and survival multi-tool. Its abilities are Wrecking Ball, Shockwave, Path of Destiny. We also will be pumping out some half-charge heavy attacks throughout as well, which I'll go into more detail about. Second, your attributes. In Season 2, it's now a 300 con, 200 strength meta. With your extra 10 points, if you're at 625, I prefer 310 con. It synergizes well with the health amulet perk and regenerating on the earring. You can do 10 extra strength if you would like, but I think you just gain a little more value out of the extra 10 constitution. When it comes to your equipment, this is kind of a breakdown on how to go from 2 perk gear all the way up to like your best in slot. Um, so ultimately, we want 4 or more resilient. Insatiable Gravity Well perk we want on the armor. 4 or more Shirking Fort or Elemental Aversion. Commit to one. Don't ever try not to mix those. And then we want to dump the rest in the Freedom. Sundering Shockwave perk we want on the Hammer. Enfeebling Maelstrom we want on the Great Axe. Unless specified by the army composition, you really want to be in medium armor. There are a few point positions where they may put you in heavy, but more often than not, you're going to want to be in medium. Heart Rune. Brutal Detonate is king. Um, it is the Detonate will separate you from an average bruiser to a great one, depending on how you use it, which we'll cover here in a bit. And then consumables. So health pots, regen pots, cleansing potions, and then a defensive consumable. The defensive consumables, you have 4 major options. So you have Oak Flesh Balm, Gemstone Dust, Fire Absorption pots are pretty popular. My personal choice, though, is up on screen, the Infused Arcane Absorption Potion. Um,
For
That's
detonate?
usually what I would run. Correct, yeah. So it's going to be your detonate protection. When you're clump fighting, you're going to have 2 ways to mitigate, well, 3 ways to mitigate detonates that are going to hit you. 1, you dodge them and iframe them. 2, you're going to hit them with some weaken from your enfeebling maelstrom and your shockwave to mitigate the damage, to lower it. Or 3, you have an arcane absorption potion running. The nice thing about the absorption potions is lasting consumption perk on your bag does extend these potions duration. Whereas oak flesh or gemstone, once you take so many hits, it wears off on its own. These will be on for an extended period of time. Additionally, we should be using tier 5 stat food. Depending on what your attribute spread is, you're going to have either strength, or strength con mix or con, however it takes you to get to 200, 300. A tier 5 honing stone, as well as a tier 5 desert sunrise. Those should be the consumables that you're eating right before the war starts to kind of get max buffs on there. All right, that was the quick crash through the basics. Again, it's just to kind of like say, okay, this is where we're at. Here's our, where we're starting at. Now, kind of going into the more advanced stuff here. So, the Great Axe. Great Axe light attacks are very, very important. This is your filler, typically, as a bruiser. Um, you pair these with the refreshing move Great Axe and you're farming your cooldowns back. More cooldowns, that equals more gravity wells, more clumps, more maelstroms, which can potentially lead to more wipes. So the light attacks, you're getting your cooldown reduction. You're charging alt, obviously, because you're doing damage. You have 2 different empowers that you're building. So Greed, which is one of your perks, whenever you hit with the light attack, you gain 5% empower, up to 15%. And then also your Mauler's Fury stack. So you're building both of those. You're doing poke damage, and you have Grid active, which due to enduring strikes, you're going to have 12% damage reduction. While Grid is active. The perk says adds Grit to Great Axe heavy attacks. Also grants 12% damage reduction while Grit is active. That is all Grit. Anytime you have Grit active with the Great Axe out, you gain that 12% reduction. It does not have to be heavy attacks. So the Great Axe light attack is really your main filler when you're healthy. When you're not so healthy, you're going to have your hammer out, which I'll cover here in a little bit. All right, Maelstrom. An iconic bruiser ability right here. I mean, everyone's familiar with the ability, what it does. You know, it hits 2 times, has grit, puts an AoE weaken on that second hit, pulls enemies in, absorbs their projectiles, which is massive, by the way. Absorbing projectiles does so much for the clump, for your allies within that clump. Um, Enemy heals, if they're shooting an orb in or a beacon in, boom, it'll eat those. Any enemies, penetrating arrows or fireball, it'll absorb those. It'll actually, if somebody hits you with a pillar of fire, it'll actually move that pillar of fire offset. It'll actually move it out from underneath of that clump. Anyone who's messed around with fire staff may have noticed that whenever they've pillar of fired a Great Axe player that's using Maelstrom, their pillar of fire hits off to the side. That's why, because of Maelstrom. Enfeebling Maelstrom, the weapon slash armor perk, puts that AoE weaken on the second hit. 8-second, 25% weaken on the Great Axe is massive, especially if you think about it. Most of the guys you're hitting with that Maelstrom are going to be trying to detonate you. So now you're lowering their detonate damage by 25%, potentially more if they've been hit by a Shockwave, other forms of weaken as well. So that's why it's crucial, to get that perk on your Great Axe, preferably, or on your armor, but preferably Great Axe. Good Great Axe that has this perk on there is from the Worm Raid. The Worm Raid drops literally the best in slot Great Axe, thwarting strikes, refreshing move, and feebling maelstrom. So if you have a Worm Raid set or join the Discord for the Worm Raid, it's definitely a good thing to get into. A cheaper way to get that Great Axe is through that raid than crafting it or buying it yourself. So, but all right, moving on to charge repositioning tool. This one's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Prio using it defensively if you can. There are times where you could use it offensively, but I'm telling you, more often than not, when you use it offensively, you pay for it later, especially in a competitive war. If it's a farm war, yeah, whatever, you're using it however you want. But using it offensively in a competitive war will more often get you killed than it does get you kills, if that makes sense. So, Prio using it defensively. Always, as you're fighting, you're always looking for a lane. You're always, while you're in a clump, you're looking for a way out. Think of like a running back in football, if you know football at all. They're always kind of looking for that lane, through the linemen, so that way they can get, more yardage. Same thing with charge. You're kind of looking for your way out because, as you know, with charge, when you run into somebody, whether it's ally or enemy, that impact will stop you in your tracks. So always look for your open lane to get out. Use this defensively as a defensive repositioning tool. Use it to save your life or use it to save your healer's life. Your healer calls for peels, hop out of the clump, use charge, get right to him as quick as you can. Peel that little assassin, whoever's on him, peel them off of them. So, Prio use it defensively, whether to save your own life or your healer's life. That's the big takeaways with charge. Gravity Well. The best war ability in the game since literally launch. Always has been. No matter how many times it's been nerfed, this is still the best war ability in the game, hands down. So, it creates and maintains clumps. We all know what Gravity Well does. We've all used it. You have 2 hits of void damage. They both get calculated at 2 different times. So when you throw your Gravity Well, that calculates your initial void damage hit. And then when it detonates, the Insatiable Gravity Well perk is then calculated at that time. So just kind of a heads up if you ever thought about how that damage is figured. When you throw it, that calculates one. When it blows up, it calculates the other one. So both hits are actually set off of 2 different empower stacks, essentially. When you throw it, if anyone is pulled to the center, they're rooted for 1 second, which means this is a great tool to use on people who do not have grit. Okay, you'll see. I'm going to mention that a few more times throughout tonight. Hitting targets without grit is perfect for our build. Maelstrom pulls people in. Gravity Well pulls people in. Both of those do not affect people who are gritted, but they both destroy people who do not have grit, aka healers, BBIGs, VGIGs. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to hit that a couple more times. While enemies are inside of the Gravity Well, they're slowed by 60%. Great, because 200 strength buffs all of our damage towards people who were slowed. So awesome. That increases all of our damage, including your detonate damage. You do heal slightly on this, not a big deal. Ultimately, try to use a Gravity Well and be inside of your Gravity Well with a Sacred Ground underneath of you. So listen for your healer, watch where they're putting their sacreds, fight on top of your friendly sacreds. And then also on top of that, it grants Fortify to all of your allies within, making it a even better clump fighting tool. So keep that in mind. Again, Gravity Well is an amazing ability. The biggest thing with Gravity Well that really increases your kill potential on clumps is pairing it well with One, your Void Gauntlet player within your group, and two, with a Cleanse Potion and then a Detonate. So anytime you are looking to kill as a group, as a 5-man, one, you need to communicate that, right? You see, it's being called, hey, top of point, we have, a clump, we need to wipe it. You need to communicate with your group. Hey, I have Detonate up. Awesome. Me too. I have Gravity Well. Okay, perfect. You know what? The other Bruiser doesn't, but he has Shockwave up. You guys can work together to Gravity Well, CC, Detonate, and then the VG comes in, Obliv, screams, wipes that clump. The key to that is going into that clump with a cleansing pot active at that time. So cleansing potion, a lot of people don't know this. Cleansing potion actually gives you, it clears all your debuffs, but then it gives you a 5-second buff that prevents you from gaining debuffs. There are a few debuffs in the game that will ignore that, but most debuffs will not apply to you, weaken being one of them. So if you're going into a clump with intent to wipe, having a cleansing potion popped as you're going in will increase not only your survivability, because you're not getting rended, you're not getting, debuffed by all these things that could kill you, but it's also not going to let you get weakened. So now your Detonate, your Maelstrom, everything's hitting much harder. So if you ever wonder, like, man, these guys, they seem like they're destroying me in war. More often than not, those guys have pre-popped their cleansing potions as they engaged on you. It's a pretty high level, I guess, tech that a lot of people don't know about, and it makes a world of difference in survivability. All right, moving on to the Warhammer. So the Warhammer, again, as I said earlier, is kind of our CC/survival multi-tool. So Wrecking Ball, first ability we're going to go over. Again, Wrecking Ball, number one, boom, can knock down non-gridded enemies, right? So healers, BBIGs, VGIGs, you can knock them down onto the ground and flatten them. Another good target for this, actually, believe it or not, is the point tank for the enemy team. Typically, they're not going to have grit. They're going to have a shield out. If you can hit them on the ass with Wrecking Ball, you will flatten them on the ground, lowering their shield. The reason that's important is right now, Sword and Shield tanks on point, when they're right clicking, that defensive formation, that buff that's around them, that circle, gives all of their teammates 30% mitigation. So knocking them on the ground will interrupt that 30% mitigation. You can also obliv it and it'll go away as well. But this is your Bruiser's way of interrupting that to ensure that your people are going to do 30%, well, not 30% less damage, I guess is the better way to say it, to that clump. So you can use it offensively. It does grant 20% fortify, which goes away on weapon swaps. So if you do use it, Wrecking Ball, try to follow up with your Warhammer on something else to make use of that fortify. If you just hard swap, that's fine too. Just understand that hard swapping, you are going to dump that fortify that you just gave yourself. So you can use this to follow up with maybe a half, charged hammer heavy or a shockwave, something, because now you have that additional fortify. You're pretty tanky. So, um, in the event that you are out of stamina, this is an awesome, awesome tool of getting out of clumps. You're out of stamina. Maybe you got like vines and you had to dodge a couple times to iframe, a detonate, a shockwave, whatever to keep yourself alive. Now you're out of stam and you're stuck in this clump. You can't jump because you're out of stam. So you can use Wrecking Ball to kind of give you a leap away from the action. If you hit somebody, good chance you're gonna. You gain more fortify. With the Warhammer out as you're moving, you gain more defense as well due to perks. So it's just a good way to get out of a clump safely. All right. Next, Shockwave. So another iconic Bruiser ability. Shockwave is bloated. This ability honestly does so much for such a low cooldown straight up. So you're going to put a stun, right? So stuns in clumps isn't a big deal. It's more of an animation cancel on the enemies. You're going to interrupt whatever they're doing. But you weaken them, you slow them, you're going to give them exhaustion, so you're going to hinder their stamina regeneration, which is massive. The slow is massive again. All the 200 strength players, their damage goes up whenever someone's affected by a slow. And you're going to rend them if you have the Sundering Shockwave perk on your Warhammer. So 14% rend, a slow, exhaust, a stun, a weaken. So much on an AoE ability that also heals you. Not for a lot, but it does heal you for a little bit. So try to make sure you're using Shockwaves in a friendly sacred to maximize survivability. That's a big thing always. Always try to fight in friendly sacreds. Ping the sacred, call it out within your microcomms. Hey, sacred, bottom right a point. Awesome. And now you're going to fight in it. The enemies will come to you. believe it or not. You don't always have to run to the enemies. They're looking for someone to fight, you know? They want to fight you. So you can literally fight in your friendly sacred if you have to. If, say, your healer used a sacred already, doesn't have another one ready, fight in it. You know, you don't have to run out of it and kill yourself. Um, Now, try to plan that and communicate with your healer. You know, hey, we're looking top of point. You know, save sacred for top, something like that. Or the healer, they'll probably, you know, once you guys build some synergy, they'll know that as well. But definitely something very good to communicate. A couple great ways to use Shockwave. So the standard solo like bruiser combo that was like iconic for a very very long time still is you know, you throw your gravity well, you shockwave it, and then you maelstrom, right? And then if you do it just right, your maelstrom second hit pretty much hits the same time your gravity well blows up, and it does a big burst of damage, which is great. Another way you can do it is you can work with your other bruiser. You see them throw their gravity well, now you can get your hammer out, you can lead right into it, you know, with a wrecking ball. Boom, you knock them down, you gain fortified. Now you can go right into your shockwave, and you're communicating this so that way your other bruiser can come in, doesn't have to switch off of his great axe, can light attack to get greed, has their deck going, has a cleansing pot going, maelstroms, and now your two combos together does massive damage. And then you can switch to your axe and follow up and keep the enemy staggered if any of them lived, you know, through that clump. So good communication with your other bruiser. And just good paying attention. Sometimes you don't even need to say it. You see them throw a grav, dude, get that hammer out and just say, I'm ready to shock it. You know, I mean, and then they know, boom, awesome. Now I can go right in, get a left click in to get some greed, and then do a maelstrom for, you know, really chunky in power and good damage. Um, but with that being said, always try to make sure that you have a cleansing pot popped when you're running into that clump. The way I always was taught and the way that I always teach it is literally that cleansing potion should leave your lips like milliseconds before you hit that clump. That should be the last thing right as you're about to get into that clump. Boom, cleansing pot. Um, and you can pop a regen potion right before that. So you pop a regen potion, cleansing pot right as you're running in, then boom, you enter that clump, and now you're not getting debuffed. They are, because most of these guys aren't doing that stuff. They're going to be weakened, they're going to be slowed, you're not. And you're going to have the damage advantage at that time. So always try to make sure you're popping regen potions before you go into clumps and popping cleansing potions, which again, cleansing potions are only purchasable while in war. And that's what you should really be focusing your points purchasing. They are the lifeblood of the bruiser. And they're another reason why Freshing Toast is so important because it reduces the cooldown of your cleansing potion as well. Okay, on to Path of Destiny. Path of Destiny is an ability that really took a big hit when they nerfed the damage of the hammer CC abilities. It used to be able to heal you for a metric fuck ton, to put it plainly. I mean, it used to heal a big chunk. The heal is still there. Better if you use it while standing in a sacred ground. The biggest thing right now, though, through Path of Destiny is it's a range stagger, right? You have great alt charge off of it, so you kind of have two different ways to use it right now. It's, do I want to get the most amount of alt charge possible and hit the most people, which is usually the clump, or I just ran out of the clump, I'm almost dead. And the clump fight's still going on. You survived. You have Path of Destiny up. You can now aim it towards their little clump of healers and interrupt their healers, so their bruisers that are still fighting in the clump have a higher chance of dying. I will say this: Path of Destiny probably gets bruisers killed more than any ability in the game because it does not have grit. You get so used to having grit on your other abilities. Path of Destiny does not. You get greedy. You use it while on point in a clump, you know, around a bunch of others, and they will pull you in and punish you for that. So whatever you do, do not use this while you're in the middle of a clump. It will get you killed. Make sure you're out of the clump. Try to make sure you're standing in a sacred ground to maximize the prevailing spirit heal, and aim it at either the clump for most alt charge or at the group of healers to interrupt them to give our bruisers the upper hand within that clump. One of the most important things on Season 2 meta right now is Detonate. Brutal Detonate is probably the make or break for bruisers. Using Detonate correctly will make you a much better bruiser. This right here is what will separate you from an average bruiser to a great bruiser, is your Detonate usage. So just fighting in a clump and popping Detonate will typically not end well in a competitive war. There's multiple different ways to, you know, work a Detonate correctly. Number one, as I said earlier, pair it with a cleansing potion. Always. If you're going to detonate, there's two big check marks that you better have. One, you better have a Void Gauntlet player with you, and 2, you better have your Cleanse Potion active. So pairing it with a Cleansing Potion is massive. Again, it's going to make sure you don't get weakened, and that's what it's all about. Keeping that weaken off of you, staying tanky because they're not able to debuff you will ensure that you get the explosion off and you're doing the most amount of damage possible from the enemy side of things. There's nothing that they can do to prevent that damage other than getting the fuck out, which I'm going to talk about here in a second on how to avoid that. The next thing, coordinate with your group. Scream and Oblivion is massive for detonates. Coordinate with your group. Have your other bruiser with you. If your other bruiser also has detonate at the same time, even better. Both of you guys going in, Cleanse Potion active. Void Gauntlet screams, oblivs. So the scream is going to do a few things, right? It's going to root them, which increases your damage from 200 strength. It's going to hold them in place because of the root, which, really hurts them. It's going to put anti-heal on them. So it's going to make the AoE heals they're standing in not as strong. It's going to make any DE that hits them not as strong. And then also, the Oblivion is going to remove all of their fortifies. All the fortifies that they have on them right now, boom, are gone. And you gain in power, increasing your detonate damage. So having a Scream and Obliv when you're detonated into a clump is massive. The next thing is gaining your own in power. So you have 2 weapons that are both amazing at granting in power. So Great Axe, as you know, between Greed stacks and between Mauler's Fury, you have a fuck ton of Empower between those two. I think it's 45% total, if I remember off the top of my head. Warhammer, a heavy attack, and then also by taking damage, power through pain gives you 30% as well, or 35%. So that's going to be in power cap right there. So both of these weapons have a way to basically boost your empower on detonate to get fat hits. I prefer Great Axe. The reason being is you have Maelstrom, farms and power, but also pulls them into you and weakens them. So it just kind of works together, synergizes well to detonate if they're trying to get away from you. A big thing about detonate people don't know is you could cook it. You have 3 seconds before it detonates on you. So you don't have to be in the clump fighting your brains out and then click detonate. You can literally be right on the edge of the clump, left click on a healer, right? Boom, hitting this healer, hitting this healer. And then Matt says, hey, we're wiping bottom left, bottom left, bottom left. You can hit your detonate, pop your regen, pop your cleanse, hop right in, hit your Maelstrom, and now you're gonna, they don't have time to react because you just hopped in with that detonate. So that's another way you can use it. You can cook it outside and then hop right in. Think of like Call of Duty if you're cooking a grenade before you throw it, at someone just to make sure it gets there, impacts and wipes them. And again, so line number 5 on here, use with the intent to wipe. Make it lethal. By pairing it with lines 1 through 4, that's how you do it. You work a cleansing potion. You talk to your group. You communicate it. Hey, I'm at 80% charge right now on my detonate. I almost have it. Your VG says, perfect. I got vines up. I'll save it for you. Awesome. Okay, I got detonate now. Okay, where are we looking? We're gonna let's stay out. Let's wait for a clump. Let's wait for a clump. Okay, clump's developing top of point. Let's get it. And now you can go in. All your abilities are ready. You're coordinated, and you can you bring actual lethal kill pressure to that clump. Detonate again is massive. Using detonate right, using it with cleansing potions, using it coordinated with your group. This will, infinitely times make you more lethal as a 5-man group right here. Just your bruisers communicating and using their detonates with the 5-man. Okay. So Warhammer versus Great Axe. When should I have each weapon out? Ultimately, with the hammer, if you're using your hammer cooldowns, obviously you're going to have it out. Outside of that, it comes down to if you're stammed out and you do not have charge up, get your hammer out. Your hammer is going to give you more defense. And if you don't have any Fury stacks, so your Mauler's Fury's been dumped for whatever reason, it's a lower timer. Maybe you got, CC'd, you missed a couple hits, had to play life, whatever, and you have no Great Axe cooldowns and you're in the clump, get your hammer out. Otherwise, you should have your Great Axe out. Your Great Axe is out when you have cooldowns ready. When you have high Fury stacks and you're healthy and you have charge up. So you're in the clump, you've got, 8 or more stacks, you're in there left clicking, you're brawling, and you're healthy, you've got good consumable usage still, and your charge is up, you can keep your hammer out. If you're outside of the clump and you're healthy, you can get your Great Axe back out and start left clicking some healers or some squishies around the point to get your cooldowns back, farm some ultimate, and just do some poke damage. Maybe you make a healer pull his rapier out and run away and somebody dies because of it, So again, If you're in a clump and you're stammed out with no charge up, get your hammer out. If you've got no Great Axe cooldowns, no Fury stacks, get your hammer out. Otherwise, you really want to have your Great Axe out. You want to farm cooldowns, more Gravwells, more Maelstroms, more clump wipes, essentially. Okay, roles and positioning. So this is going to be a few pages here. So first one, this is some statements. So number one, stop dueling 300 con players. Okay, force the fight on top of the enemy non 300 con players. So you want to bring the fight to the enemy healers, the enemy VGIGs and BBIGs. Again, the Bruiser kit is fantastic for disrupting people without grit. You have 300 con now. We don't have 300 strength anymore. So trying to fight somebody that also has 300 con literally is just a way for our healers to stat pad and nothing to happen other than them to capitalize on us fighting on them and not on, their squishies, essentially. If you're farming alt and you're preparing, to wipe point, same thing. Fight on the non 300 con players. Bring the fight to them. Because here's the thing. Here's the reality of it. If you fight on top of a healer, they may use their riposte, their flesh, and they get away from you. Well, now it's on cooldown. You fight on top of a BBIG or a VGIG, they use their entomb. Now it's on cooldown. And now, when the call to all in on point is made and we're going to wipe, if those guys get close, they no longer have their big defensive cooldown. A VGIG without entomb dies. A BBIG, same thing. With no entomb, they die. So now they can't get close. If they do, they get farmed anyways. So now we've put them in a position to where they have to say, hey, sorry, my bruisers, you guys are on your own. And then now, two bruisers without a VGIG behind them, that's nothing. So when you take away that VGIG, you weaken the front line. You take away their support, the front line's weakened. So by fighting on them prior to the clump fights, you're just getting their cooldowns out. You don't have to burn all your cooldowns. You can use like a wrecking ball. Again, you're on a non-gridded enemy. You can use a wrecking ball, disrupt them, get them with some light attacks, farm some alt, and then boom, when the clumps happen, now they've used their cooldowns and we're healthy for it. We're ready. If they're an enemy and they have a life staff, hit them, hit them, hit them, hit them. Um, I mean, this is everybody's role in the army. If you ever see a healer, an enemy healer, hit them. Because if all it takes for them is to run, and any of our healers will tell you, when they're running, their teammates die. And that's all it takes, man. You hit their healers, you get them moving, you get that life staff out of their hand. Now their players who are charging into clumps are dying instantly because they don't have a healer ready to DE them because you have them running. With that being said, prio peeling for your healers. Definitely talk to your healers before war, during war. Make sure that they know they can communicate when they need peels and peel for them. Don't say, they got a rapier, they'll get away, they'll be fine. Because a lot of times these kill teams they're getting better and better, and they're working with ranged players. So typically what'll happen is, sword and shield, assassin, great sword, hatchet, whatever, they're gonna jump your healer. Your healer's going to burn their cooldowns, and now the bow player just destroys them, or the musket player, or fire staff, whoever they're working with in their kill team. So peel for your healers. Make sure your healers know to call for it. Make sure your healers know to say, hey, I got somebody on me. I'm on bonfire side. Someone's on me. And then boom, now got it. You turn and burn and you help them out. Because if you're in that clump fighting, your healer's getting chased, you're going to die anyways. Unless you're in the right spot in the AoE healer, Sacred, and Beacon, and that's keeping you alive. If you're not in that AoE healer, Sacred, and Beacon, there's a good chance you're not going to make it. So just get out, help your healer, keep them alive, and then get back in. Because you got to think about it. If your healer dies, not only do you die, but the other 3 people in your group are going to die too. Okay. Flex melee. So these are your melees who aren't assigned to be a point melee. So you're going to have zones assigned to you. They're going to say, hey, you're going to be, top left, top right, whichever, wherever you're assigned, that's where you're fighting. So when you're fighting in those zones, you're ultimately farming your ultimate. You're farming your detonate is what you're doing. You do not really want to use your detonate in those zones. You want to save them for when the point wipe is called. So when, Hidden Curie says, hey, we're wiping top right a point, you want to have your ults ready so that way you can turn, look at it, and you come in and just demolish the enemies on that point. So when you're in your zones, you're holding that ground. Now, with that being said, as a team, if you're just dominating, bottom right, there's no enemies there, no one to peel for, you're sitting pretty, you're looking good, look to your left and look up top. Like, look at your 2 adjacent zones and see if they need help. Flex up to help them, but always maintain vision on where you're assigned to make sure that they don't have assassins or anything slipping into that spot. Again, communicate your alt charge. Saying I'm at 70% Deto, I have Deto. Saying I have is much better than saying I'm using. Okay, and that's something I'm going to say again here in a moment. I have is better than I'm using. So always create that conversation within your group to say, hey, I had detonate. Perfect, man. I've got vines up. Sweet, let's do it. Now you can work together and now you can wipe clump. Okay, point melees. So point melees, it's a little bit different, but similar at the same time. So save and coordinate your alts, aka your detonates, for the wipe clump callouts on point in main comms, right? Main comms calls it out. You're already right there. You're ready to go. You're living in it. So when you're on point, you're not going ham. Okay. You got to play to live. You have to understand that the main comms are calling to wipe you. You are public enemy number one. They're calling to kill you. Everybody else just jumps in on the fun. You are their main target. So play to live, farm alt, and be ready for your comms to wipe clump. Okay? Don't ever get caught up fighting, 5 to 10 of you versus 20 of them. You're not going to win. So play to live, stay on point the best you can. If you have to pop off to get healthy real quick, do so, but communicate it. Okay? And then also, I kind of put this in there again. As a point player, you're going to learn who their SNS player is on point, their sword and shield player. Find out who they are. When the clump does start to build up, position yourself so you can wrecking ball their ass, so you can put them on the ground and drop that shield. And then also point VGs can oblivion that sword and shield player to wipe that buff as well. But that's a conversation for a different group of people. Again, if you need to play life, if you are out of consumes, you're about to die, you can leave point. You do not have to stay on point because you're point. Get off point, get somewhere safe, get in a friendly sacred that's off to the side, heal up, communicate it. Say, I'm playing life right now, guys. I'm playing life. Be careful, be careful. Boom, you get healthy, come back in, rejoin the fray. Biggest thing, play to live and farm alt until the next clump is called. All right, consumables. So I hit on this a little bit earlier. I'm going to hit on it again. Cleansing potion. Cleansing pot has been nerfed. It used to have a extremely low cooldown, and it was a giant snowball mechanic in war. It's been nerfed, so the cooldown's been longer, but with refreshing toast, it's still pretty small. Use them early, use them often. Again, the cleansing pot should be leaving your lips the millisecond before you enter a clump. That should be always, always, always how it goes. You can pre-drink your regen potions while going into a clump. Make sure, and this is not only when you have regen potions going, but make sure you're fighting in friendly sacreds. Always ping and hunt friendly sacreds and communicate it for your other bruisers so they can find them too. It's very, very good etiquette to communicate when you're using a health potion to your healer, so that way if you're healing yourself, they can aim at the other bruiser or the VGIG with their divine embrace and heal them instead if you're using a healing potion at that time. They also may say, healing John, and that in which case I know, okay, I'm taking my finger off my health potion and saving it for the next time I need healed. Pop the defensive consumable before going into the clump fight to have higher defense before you take damage. This is massive. Far too often I'll watch VODs and I'll see people pop like their gemstone dust, oak flesh, when they're at 20% life and they're about to die. It's a consumable that raises your defense throughout the duration that it's on you. Use it while you're at high health to get the most effectiveness out of it. Okay, so use those consumables early. Use them often. Make sure you're popping them before you take a ton of damage, so that way you get the most mitigation from that consumable that you're using. Okay, we're almost at the end here, guys. We're almost at the end here. Stamina management. Before you run into a clump, make sure you're not out of stamina or low on stamina. Okay. Take the extra second. Left click a healer if you're low. Just boom. Left click a healer. Okay. Stamina's up. Now you can hop in. With stamina management, a big thing is number 2, if you are grayed out and charges on cooldown on your Great Axe, hammer out. Okay. If you're in a clump, your stamina grayed out, get your hammer out. Unless, of course, you have a charge angle to get out of there. Okay. Back in the day, if any of you guys were bruisers when it was 300 strength tuner con, the 250 strength does regen your stamina faster than it does without while you're swinging. So you used to be able to dodge, swing, dodge, swing, and you could do that pretty much forever. Well, it's not the case anymore. Without 250 strength, our stamina regeneration is actually slower than it used to be in terms of combat stamina regeneration. So, with that being said, it is now a 2 to 3 swings per dodge tempo. So, with that being said, you really want to prioritize. So, you're dodging, you want to dodge to try to stay below 100% for your Opal procs as much as you can. Do not kill yourself doing that, okay? But try to dodge to keep it under, and then actually dodge things, aka the three main things that I put on here are really the things that set you up for death. It's going to be detonates, shockwaves, and then the second maelstrom swing, and that's primarily so that way you don't get that 25% weaken on you. Communication, probably the most important slide throughout this entire thing, other than maybe the detonate slide. Communicate, communicate, communicate. So, like I said earlier, ability communications. I have instead of I'm using. Communicating the abilities you have up will start the conversation with the rest of your group, so that way you guys can coordinate abilities to be lethal. By saying I'm using Shockwave right now, I'm using Gravity Well, everybody else has to react. When they have to react in combat, you know how it is trying to locate your friendlies. You're trying to find them. By the time you find them, that Gravity Well is already run its course. So saying I have will allow them to group up with you, and it'll allow you guys to actually be a lethal 5-man group. Location. So pinging and then saying a location like a landmark, right? Bonfire, top left, bottom left, whatever. Saying a landmark, putting a ping on it will help people find you. When you say bonfire, their camera turns towards bonfire, and now they see your ping there. So anytime you're communicating location, put a ping, say a landmark. That way they can find you, and you guys can work together as a team. If you have to play life, right? You got your ass beat in a clump, you got out alive, you got no cooldowns. There's not much combat effectiveness you can bring to the fight. Communicate that. Hey, I got to get out and play in life. I mean, anything just to let them know that they're down a player, they're down their bruiser. When you get out, now they know, okay, got it. He's not in there to help me. Maybe I need to back off and just work on the edge till he's healthy again. I hit on this earlier. I hit on it again. Listen to your healer. Familiarize yourself with your healer's voice. As a bruiser, their voice needs to be like cranked up to 200%, dude. You need to always listen to your healer and peel for them. If you're in a clump and your healer's being chased, you're going to die. Again, unless you got the luck of the draw and all of your AoE healers are healing you at that moment, you're going to die. So peel for your healer. Peeling for your healer doesn't only keep them alive, it keeps you alive and your 3 other party members. So work together, keep your healer alive, and your healer they shouldn't be like way off on their own. They should be somewhat close to you too, so that way you guys can peel them. And that's something you'll communicate. Okay, that's it. Everyone, thank you for the time.